If fun is what you're after, I want to read a book. If fun is what you're after, pick a book, take a look. Pick a book and take a look. Understand what you read. Understand what you read. Connect your life, what you read. Connect your life, what you read. Let's get hooked with book and read in every nook. Share the stories that you read. I feel it in my heart, beat by beat. I feel it in my mind, I'm ready to read. I read, I read, I 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 read. Looking for a laughter. If fun is what you're after. Grazing for adventure. If there's a question in your mind, pick a book, take a look. Pick a book and take a look. Understand what you read. Understand what you read. Connect your life, what you read. Connect your life, what you read. Let's get hooked with book and read in every nook. Share the stories that you read. I feel it in my heart, beat by beat. I feel it in my mind, I'm ready to read. I read, I read, I 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 read.
A philosophy professor stood before his class and had some items in front of him. When the class began wordlessly, he picked up a large, empty mayonnaise jar and proceeded to fill it with rocks, right to the top, rocks about 2 inches diameter. He then asked the students if the jar was full. They agreed that it was. So the professor then picked up a box of pebbles and poured it into the jar. He shook the jar lightly. The pebbles, of course, rolled into the open areas between the rocks. The students laughed. He asked his students again if the jar was full. They agreed that yes, it was. The professor then picked up a box of sand and poured it into the jar. Now, said the professor, I want you to recognize that this is your life. The rocks are the important things, your family, your partner, your health, your children, everything that is so important to you that if it were lost, you would be nearly destroyed. The pebbles are the other things in life that matter, but on the smaller scale, the pebbles represent things like your job, your house, your car. The sand is everything else. The small stuff if you put the sand or pebbles into the jar first, there is no room for the rocks. The same goes for your life. If you spend all your energy and time on the small stuff, materials, things, you will never have room for the things that are truly most important. Pay attention to the things that are critical in your life. Play with your children. Take your partner out dancing. There will always be time to go to work, clean the house, give a dinner party, and fix the disposals. Take care of the rocks first, the things that really matter. Set your priorities. The rest is just pebbles and sand. name is Bhavya Dakar. I am 8 years old and I study in Juk School. My favorite book is My Pet Slime because when the girl's grandma brought stardust from space, her slime turned into real life. I learned that if you don't touch something, if someone doesn't say you should touch, you'll end up in trouble. I would like to ask the author, if I meet him in real life, that how did that kid's girl grandma find that space dust? My favorite character was Piper McLean because she had a really good voice. If I could give the book another name, it would be I Have a Pet Slime, because if the title was just My Pet Slime, it wouldn't make any sense. I wish that I didn't have to be so sad that the slime was sick. I think it will make a good television show because it looks like a cartoon and I love watching cartoons. I would like to meet the slime pet because the slime looks very squishy and cuddly.
Zangpola. My name is Diki Chodin and I'm the founding principal of ELC High School. This that you see here is our little library, and as you can see, it's decorated with not just books but also a lot of flowers that we take great pride in creating our own craft work, and so these are mostly done by teachers and some of our students. Essentially, I believe that a library should be a very happy place, not dingy and dark as most university libraries tend to be. But I feel that if it is nice and bright and welcoming, then children are also drawn to the idea of books and reading. We don't get a whole lot of opportunities to come to the library because the timetable is quite packed. But when the children do manage to come is when the language teachers can, for a change of scenery, have their language classes here, and where children have the opportunity and the option and the autonomy to look at different books. But in addition to our library, we have mini libraries installed in the language classes so that again the children have that autonomy, and our teachers are looking because children normally are not inclined to reading, so they are conducting reading sessions in the course of their language lessons as well. And on top of that, most recently we also installed a mini open library so that again the kids have access and exposure to books wherever they are, and that they don't necessarily have to come to the library to have access to books and reading. We all know that reading is important, and reading is really the window to the world and to knowledge and wisdom. Unfortunately, I think schools and students are not as inclined to giving reading the due importance that it deserves. And so in 2015, His Majesty the King, who felt that Bhutanese students were not reading enough, actually decided to declare that the year 2015 would be the year that would be declared as the National Reading Year. And what better time than to launch it in the year that beloved Drukgyal Dzongkha turned 60 years. And so that year, I remember very vividly, the schools all around the country were doing various kinds of reading activities. They were recording how many books were read by students across the schools. And they also had something called Reading Week activities. And so there was a lot of enthusiasm for books and reading, and really directing our attention to the importance of reading. So at ELC, and that time actually the ELC High School was not quite in operation, but at the time I was the principal of the Early Learning Center. And what we decided to do was actually to collaborate with Read Bhutan. As you know, Read Bhutan is an organization that really tries to support schools and children by providing them with resources and books and little open libraries across the country. So we partnered with them, and we decided to bring out a series of audiobooks. And the idea behind it was really, if you can see here, it says, as part of the Read to Lead project. So if our children are really to own the reading as a hobby and as a habit, then not only were we looking at them improving and honing their reading skills, but how about if you actually read to lead and inspire fellow students around the country, especially those in pockets around the country where they don't have that much exposure to books or to television or to libraries. And so we the books that we did the reading on. So BCMD, as you know, when we transitioned to democracy, came up with some really important publications called What's Fair and Who's Responsible. And this was about teaching democracy and the idea of democracy and the idea of responsibility and good citizenship through these books. So I thought, wow, these would be the perfect books to make audiobooks on. And so we made I think over 500 copies of CDs. And in the following year, and distributed to schools around the country, whoever we could. In fact, we even submitted it to the then Minister of Education at one of our functions. And then the following year, they actually had a Dzongkha translation of these two same books. And so we were able to do a Dzongkha version. And I think the outcome is that we say when you share, you learn twice, is like while our children were honing their own skills in reading in both English and Dzongkha, they were actually inspiring their fellow students as well. And then actually this was in 2016 after we came here, we had the privilege of receiving this book from His Majesty the King, and it actually says, Prince Siddhartha, the story of Buddha, a gift from His Majesty the King. And this is really in the spirit of His Majesty's intent and wish to inspire children to read, but also to read books on compassion and wisdom. And what better than to start with the story of Buddha. So it gave us great pleasure, and it was a great honor that all of our young children could read. There are about 30 chapters, and we also had adult members read various parts. And so this too we were able to distribute in the form of CDs to schools around the country. So what you see behind here is a poster of a poem that we wrote in the year 2004, and we were able to recite it on the day of His Majesty the Trugal Chipa's 49th birth anniversary. So this is an inspiration that we could have for our children, not only to be good readers, but also to be good writers and to be inspired to do their own writing, especially when they feel that emotion of gratitude or of bravery and courage, all of which is so well embodied by our kings and our monarchs. So this is the poem or a tribute to our beloved Trugal Chipa. O beloved King, forever in the service of your people, how do we tell you what you truly mean to us? In the land of the deities, blessed kingdom the clouds, a prince was born not long ago, a prince to call our own. As he grew, that bright-eyed lad, from strength to strength he did take, this beloved land we call our own. What wonders he did bring to his land, to his people, sequestered from the world beyond, sequestered now no more. Living in serenity, peace and tranquility, alas, peace was not to be had for long. Full 12 years of fear and dread ended thus in 2003. Tales of wonder, tales of courage, tales to pass down through the ages. How speedily, how valiantly, how miraculously that peace was once again restored. O beloved King, forever in the service of your people, words we find are not enough to tell you what you truly mean to us. In reading and in learning to read, we also see the importance of inspiring children to become writers, and what better way than to be able to have access to books that have been authored by Bhutanese writers. And in recent years, with the Mountain Echoes Literature Festival that have been taking place every summer, and now of course we have the Druk Yul Literature Festival, I believe that we can really encourage our young students to already aspire to become writers. So these are some of the inspiration that our children can get. So Pasu's Diary, I think everybody's heard of it, and so our children have been reading these books as well. So last year, for instance, we had the 10-page reading 10 pages a day, what you call a drive that was done by VTOP, which is the Volunteer Teachers of Bhutan. And so most of our children, while they were in lockdown mode, were able to read and video record, and so we were able to post them to inspire other students as well. So I believe also the history of Bhutan is something that we can all be inspired to read, whether we are teachers or students. And then this particular book is called The Word Weavers, and this we have our very own poet. Actually, she's from Bhutan, but based in the Philippines. And there's this beautiful poem called The Weaving, and where she talks about the weaving of kishutaras and textiles in Kurtela. Books like, of course, this is really a classic. I think this must be one of the first books that came out for children, Folk Tales of Bhutan by Kunzang Chodin, and then we actually had the author of Metho's Great Adventure by Louise Dorji come as a guest author, a guest speaker at the Early Learning Center some years ago. And this is inspiring because this was written by a very young primary level student, and I think she's even gone on to writing others. So I believe that reading is not only important to become fluent in language, to be able to speak and read and write, but I feel it also enhances our understanding and appreciation of our own traditions and rich cultural heritage. So we're really keen that some of these authors can visit the school as guest speakers and really inspire the children to see that when you read books and when you see an author's name and it is not one from our country, we can't imagine that there's a real person who's written this. So I think it'll be really good to have them come as guest speakers and inspire our young readers to also become aspiring writers of their own stories and of the experiences in our country and anything else really.
My name is Sonam Mugen. I'm the proprietor of Sonyala, an OTT platform in the Bhutanese entertainment industry, and I'm also the director and scriptwriter for the company. Well, in filmmaking, if you don't read a lot, you don't really get many ideas. But personally, I read books related to filmmaking because I just wanted to get ideas, of what other people, have. But for my work, I try as far as possible not to follow those ideas. I try and come up with my own ideas. If you are interested in making films, I recommend you to read books like In the Blink of an Eye and Shooting to Kill. Well, I have to admit I wasn't really a reader, but I have to also say that I have read a few books when I was young. I didn't have a particular genre of books because I read whatever I could lay hands on. Well, recently I'm reading books related to filmmaking. At the same time, also I'm reading, Buddhist texts like Pardathural. Pardathural is a very, beautiful Buddhist text that every one of us has to read it. Read it and try to understand it. But you cannot understand the whole thing. Even I don't understand the whole, thing, but I read it so that it helps me improve speaking, at the same time understanding few principles of Buddhism, and more so it teaches you how to die peacefully. And there's the English version of the same book written by Sogyal Rinpoche. It's called Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. The beauty of that book is it also talks about how you want to live. So I really recommend everyone to read this book. Doesn't matter how young you are, because you know, you don't have the guarantee of living, you know, how long. So, you know, it prepares you to die peacefully, and also it helps you to live gracefully. Well, I don't really have a favorite book, but whatever books I read, I enjoyed reading all of them. But I can only advise young people to read as much as possible and then write as much as possible. You have to manage at least half an hour or 1 hour in a day to read something and write something, so that it helps you, you know, improve your writing, speaking, and, you know, gathering contents. 3 books that I would recommend you young readers to read are, you know, Tibetan Book of Living and Dying by Sogyal Rinpoche, then Jigme Namgyal Stokje, done by the CBS. That is really beautiful book, and it takes you back in a medieval era. Also teaches you how Bhutan was back then, and also helps you gather knowledges and informations of you know, political and religious situations back then, before we had our first king. Other book that I would recommend young readers to read is Pema Kathang. Pema Kathang is, I believe that's a very long biography of Guru Rinpoche, but there is the shorter version of that book, which is called Kathang Dup. It's very short, so you know, read it like you pray. I think it serves the purpose of both, you know, praying to Guru Rinpoche. At the same time, you will also get to learn about Guru Rinpoche's Guru Rinpoche's legacies. So reading is very important, because when you read, you will know, and when you know, you will have contents, you know. So even to talk, to speak, you know, when you have no contents, you can't do much. So please read as much as possible, and also write as much as possible, not just in English. Dzongkha is very important. Most of us believe that there are not many books and references in Dzongkha, but there are. So if you want to improve your Dzongkha, you have to read Buddhist scripts, Buddhist namthars. There are many beautiful namthars, both in the schools and outside of schools. So please grab copies of those namthars and read as much as possible.